everybody. Dan Schinder here on Drum Talk TV, here with a true musical legend, Alan White, currently of Yes, and for the last 40 years.
42 years, actually.
42,
Yeah.
How are you?
I am fine, considering it's a NAMM show, yes.
This is during the midst of NAMM, and we're suffering from a bit of the NAMM avalanche, I guess, right?
I call it NAMM over.
NAMM over. Hey, going back to...
I'm NAMMed right now.
Over NAMMed. Numbed by NAMM. If we go back 42 years, and actually this first question comes from my son, Steven. He said to ask you, a lot of people already know that you joined Yes very close to the Close to the Edge tour starting. How long did it take you to learn the material for the tour?
2 hours is about the shortest show we do. Usually, in those days, it was more like 3 hours. So, I only had, they asked me on a Friday, and they said, by the way, we have a gig to do on Monday. So I had the weekend, basically. So it was probably about a 3-day process.
Good thing the music was so simple.
Well, it's not quite that simple.
I'm teasing.
No, but actually, I was already playing in a band that did very complex kind of arrangements and time signatures and that kind of thing. So I was kind of prepared in a way.
And you did a lot of that kind of work with John and Yoko, right? I mean, it wasn't always just straight 4/4.
Somewhat, but mostly it was straight with John. Yeah. Mostly it was relatively simple, but I always used to say to myself, it's not what you play, it's how you play it.
Right. One of the things that's amazed me about the Yes catalog of music is if you take that first studio album that you recorded, Tales from Topographic Oceans, which by the way is that's my album when someone asks, okay, if you're stuck on an island, that's the one for me. It's just amazing music.
Yeah. Tropical Island Discs or something like that. That's what they called it. Yeah, well, it was a long process. I mean, we rehearsed and were writing that album for 6 months before we even went in the studio. So the whole process was about 6 months of rehearsing, writing music, making all the parts work together, and then about 3 months recording it. So it was almost a year by the end.
And I'm not suggesting that the whole thing was real symbiotic, putting that together. However, regardless of what challenges there might have been artistically amongst the members of the band, you absolutely must have been so much on the same page to create a work like that. And for those who don't know, it's a double, in those days, album. It was a double album where each side was one composition of music. It was basically one story. You must have all been on the same page to be able to get through that process in only a year.
Yeah, we were very much kind of on the same page. It was a very, very kind of creative period in Yes's existence. You know, we just were going into detail about lots of things, including, for instance, side 4, which is called Ritual, and it's a whole drum ritual at the end, and so we went into detail about a lot of things, and songs like Nous sommes du soleil and all of that kind of stuff. So we spent an awful long time on creating it.
Ancient always amazes me because it has, as most Yes music does, it has virtually almost every style of music one might be familiar with within that composition, and a lot of it is really so musical that to me you can't even put a label on. Like how would you describe what kind of music is that? It's just music.
Yeah, well, Yes draw lots of influences from a lot of different walks of music, and you'll find classical, jazz, R&B, rock, all molded into one genre, you know, and basically you can't really call anything else except just Yes music because it's kind of different.
In the Ancient, the sticking that you were doing that passes back and forth, I've always wondered exactly how you did that, and I've tried to emulate it on the sides of my timpani drums. Okay.
It's a trade secret, mate. Now you'll have to dig into the depths to get that one.
Okay, we'll do that on another interview. Now, you take that end of the spectrum of Yes music, and then you can go all the way to, Fly From Here. You take that most recent album, you take Owner of a Lonely Heart, the stuff on Open Your Eyes, just the whole spectrum. What is it that has made Yes Music, and so acceptable, no matter how far it has swung one way or another?
I think because we appeal to kind of all walks of people, really. You get, obviously, we have a 3-generation span in our music nowadays. We get teenagers coming, and we get 60-year-olds coming to do the shows. So, and those guys have been coming for as long as I've been in the band. So it's a question of, appealing to the masses, basically. And
it's like a something for everybody factor.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's quite a lot of John's lyrics back then were more or less. You could. People used to say, "What is John talking about?" And basically, he was very clever because he used to use his voice as kind of like an instrument in the band, and he'd make the words sound like a melody, and just kind of make it all link together, and let the person who was listening to it create whatever they thought they meant.
Leave the interpretation up
to their imagination.
Great. What a great spirit in music,
Absolutely. Well, he's a great guy.
Yeah. And now you have John Davison with you, and you're recording a new CD, right?
Yeah.
What can you tell us about that? Anything?
No. John Davison is absolutely fantastic musician, and he was. I used to play in a band. He's actually got close connections with Seattle, where I live. He used to be in a band called Sky Cries Mary, and he's an excellent musician, a bass player, and he's got an uncanny voice that sounds almost like John Anderson, but at the same time, he's got his own identity.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, he's absolutely a wonderful guy to work with, and pleasure to be working with him.
Yeah, absolutely. What can you tell us about the material on the new album? Anything at all?
It's trade secret again.
When does it come out? Do you know that?
No. That's kind of like a question going, what's the album called? We have no idea what it's going to be called. We're still creating it.
And it's nice that you are creating. That's
probably, I would anticipate sometime at the end of, in autumn.
Okay, wonderful. Great. What can you tell us about the foundation that you work with in music education? Music education is very important at Drum Talk TV. We interview a lot of music educators and things, so we want to spread that word.
Well, about 7 years ago now, my wife and myself, Gigi, we kind of got together with some friends in Seattle who were also musicians, and we put a group together called Music Aid Northwest, and we do charity. Initially, we were going to do a concert to benefit Tsunami, right? And it just carried on from there, really. And 3 years of the 7 or 8 years we've been doing it, we spent lobbying in Olympia in Washington, the state capital. We'd have quite a few meetings with the assistant governor and to try and get a license plate passed through the government called Music Matters. And the plate, when you buy it now, says Music Matters, and basically all the money you pay extra for a specialized number plate, that goes back to schools in the state of Washington, and we allocate the money around the state of Washington for buying instruments and just music education in general.
Keep it alive in the schools.
Yeah, because it's been a proven fact that academically students do so much better when they're playing a musical instrument. And I had quite a lot of fun doing it. Mike Huckabee, he flew into town, and he's such a funny guy. He was really nice. He's a bass player, and he's a big fan of Chris Squire, who's in Yes, of course. And we did a whole jam.
Oh, wow, with Mike?
With Mike Huckabee.
What'd you play?
I can't remember. He's kind of like a guy who likes playing, three chords blues kind of songs. And anyhow, we did this semi-show, just jamming and stuff like that, and with a few friends of mine in Seattle. And he came off stage. He said, "I've never quite played with anybody like you before." And I said, "Well, I've never played with anybody like you before."
I bet not.
And then we were touring, and Chris and myself, he asked us to be on his TV show in New York. So we went down and we were on his TV, and we just jammed on his TV show.
Nice.
It was a lot of fun.
That's great. That's great. Thank you so much for joining us on Drum Talk TV. Really appreciate it. And for those of you who really want a music education, go buy a bunch of Yes CDs. Listening and watching Alan play for myself since 1970 has taught me a lot about drumming, not just with Yes, but with John Lennon, Yoko Ono, George Harrison, Leon Russell, Joe Cocker. It goes on and on and on.
You name it.
Yeah, you name it. And on another interview, we'll even talk about the soundtracks you've done for video games and commercials, all kinds of things. We'll talk some sailing, too. I directed a broadcast a few years ago for the Sydney to Hobart. We'll talk about that. But go buy a bunch of Yes. And if you live in the state of Washington, go buy the Music Matters plate so you can give back and help keep the music education programs alive there in Washington. And watch for the new Yes work sometime out in 2014. And thanks for watching Alan and I here in the Legends series on Drum Talk TV. Thanks for watching.
Music matters.
Absolutely.